For centuries, the Americas remained shrouded in mystery, unknown to much of the world. European maps depicted vast, uncharted territories, fueling the imaginations of explorers and adventurers. In 1492, Christopher Columbus, an Italian explorer sailing for the Spanish crown, embarked on a voyage that would forever alter the course of history. Believing he had found a new route to the East Indies, Columbus instead stumbled upon the Caribbean islands, marking the first significant European contact with the Americas. This momentous discovery opened the floodgates to further exploration, forever changing the relationship between the continents. Spanish conquistadors, driven by gold and the desire to spread Christianity, ventured into South and Central America. They encountered sophisticated indigenous civilizations, including the Aztecs and Incas, whose wealth and advanced societies astonished the Europeans. The introduction of European diseases, such as smallpox, devastated indigenous communities, decimating their populations and forever altering the social and cultural landscape of the Americas. Driven by a thirst for new opportunities and resources, European powers began establishing permanent settlements in North America. The Spanish extended their reach into present-day Florida and the American Southwest. The French established colonies in Canada and along the Mississippi River, focusing on the fur trade and relations with Native American tribes. England, seeking to establish its own colonial empire, founded settlements along the Atlantic coast. Jamestown, Virginia, established in 1607, became the first permanent English settlement, marking the beginning of English dominance in North America. The Pilgrims, seeking religious freedom, arrived on the Mayflower in 1620, establishing the Plymouth colony in what is now Massachusetts. European settlers clashed with Native American tribes over land, resources, and cultural differences. Colonial societies were built upon the labor of enslaved Africans forcibly brought to the Americas to work on plantations. A distinct American identity began to emerge, shaped by the challenges of frontier life, the development of local governments, and the growing desire for autonomy from European control. By the mid-18th century, tensions between Great Britain and its American colonies had reached a boiling point. The British government, burdened by debt from its involvement in the 7 Years' War, sought to exert greater control over the colonies and increase revenue through taxation. The colonists, accustomed to a degree of self-governance and resentful of what they perceived as unfair taxation, resisted these attempts, leading to a series of crises. The Stamp Act of 1765, which imposed a tax on all printed materials, sparked widespread protests throughout the colonies. The Boston Tea Party of 1773, in which colonists disguised as Native Americans dumped British tea into Boston Harbor in protest of tea taxes, demonstrated the colonists' defiance and willingness to challenge British authority. In response to colonial resistance, the British government implemented a series of coercive acts, further escalating the crisis. With the outbreak of armed conflict at Lexington and Concord in 1775, the American Revolution began in earnest. The Declaration of Independence, adopted by the Second Continental Congress on July 4, 1776, stands as a testament to the colonists' commitment to liberty and self-governance. The issue of slavery, a deeply ingrained institution in American society, cast a long shadow over the nation's development. By the mid-19th century, the United States was sharply divided along sectional lines, with the North increasingly industrialized and opposed to slavery, while the South remained heavily reliant on slave labor for its agricultural economy. Abolitionists, advocating for the immediate end to slavery, grew in influence, further heightening tensions between the North and South. The election of Abraham Lincoln, a Republican opposed to the expansion of slavery, as president in 1860 proved to be a turning point. Southern states, fearing that Lincoln's election signaled the end of their way of life, seceded from the Union, forming the Confederate States of America. The Civil War, a bloody and devastating conflict, erupted in April 1861 with the Confederate attack on Fort Sumter in South Carolina. The Union ultimately prevailed in 1865, preserving the nation and abolishing slavery with the passage of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. Despite the efforts of Reconstruction, racial prejudice and discrimination persisted, laying the groundwork for the Jim Crow era and the ongoing struggle for racial equality in America. The late 19th and early 20th centuries witnessed a period of dramatic transformation in the United States. The Industrial Revolution, fueled by technological advancements, transformed the nation into an economic powerhouse. Factories sprang up in cities, attracting waves of immigrants seeking new opportunities. The rise of railroads connected the vast country, facilitating trade and communication. Labor unrest grew as workers faced harsh working conditions, low wages, and exploitation. The gap between the wealthy elite and the working class widened, leading to social tensions and calls for reform. The Progressive era emerged as a response to these issues, advocating for government regulation of industry, social welfare programs, and greater rights for workers. The Spanish-American War in 1898 marked a turning point, expanding American influence into the Caribbean and the Pacific. The 20th century was marked by two devastating world wars that reshaped the global order. World War I, which erupted in Europe in 1914, initially saw the United States remain neutral. However, the sinking of American merchant ships by German submarines and the interception of the Zimmermann telegram, in which Germany proposed an alliance with Mexico against the United States, drew the nation into the conflict in 1917. American involvement tipped the balance of power in favor of the Allies, and the war ended in 1918 with the defeat of the Central Powers. The Treaty of Versailles, which officially ended the war, imposed harsh penalties on Germany and redrew the map of Europe. World War II, which began in 1939 with Germany's invasion of Poland, once again tested the resolve of the United States. The bombing of Pearl Harbor by Japan on December 7, 1941, propelled the nation into the war. American industrial might and military strength played a decisive role in the Allied victory in 1945. Despite the advancements made during the Progressive era, the fight for equality and social justice continued in the 20th century. The Civil Rights Movement, which gained momentum in the 1950s and 1960s, challenged racial segregation and discrimination against African Americans. Inspired by the nonviolent philosophy of Martin Luther King Jr., civil rights activists organized boycotts, sit-ins and marches to demand equal rights. The Montgomery bus boycott, sparked by Rosa Parks' refusal to give up her seat to a white passenger, demonstrated the power of nonviolent resistance. The March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom in 1963, where King delivered his iconic "I Have a Dream" speech, galvanized public support for civil rights legislation. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 outlawed discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin, while the Voting Rights Act of 1965 aimed to overcome legal barriers that prevented African Americans from exercising their right to vote. The latter half of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century have witnessed an unprecedented pace of technological advancement. The development of the Internet, personal computers and mobile devices has revolutionized communication, information sharing, and the way we live our lives. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 marked the end of the Cold War, a period of geopolitical tension between the United States and the Soviet Union. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 ushered in a new era of globalization with increased interconnectedness and interdependence among nations. Globalization, while creating economic opportunities, has also led to job displacement and increased income inequality. Climate change, driven by human activity, poses an existential threat to the planet, requiring global cooperation to address. The United States remains a global superpower, wielding significant economic, political, and military influence. However, the nation faces a number of domestic and international challenges in the 21st century. Political polarization, economic inequality, and social divisions threaten to undermine the fabric of American society. On the international stage, the United States faces challenges from rising powers such as China and Russia. Terrorism, climate change, and global pandemics require international cooperation and diplomacy to address effectively. As the world becomes increasingly interconnected, the United States must navigate a complex web of relationships and challenges to maintain its position as a global leader. Despite these challenges, the United States remains a beacon of hope and opportunity for many. Its commitment to democracy, freedom, and innovation continues to inspire people around the world.